A lichen king who has never been touched without permission. A man whose single growl can silence an entire kingdom. Cold, untouchable. Alone on his throne for 12 ruthless years. And the girl who spent 7 years pretending to be innocent. Secretly burning to be the one who makes him lose control. One forbidden night. One trembling graze down there. One guttural command growled against your skin. Do that again in private or I'll mark you right here. He does. Are you ready to fall for a king who will burn the world down to keep you?
Before we continue, kindly tell us where you are watching from, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button, because every day we have an amazing story that will make your day.
Chapter 1, The Feast of Offering. The great hall of Blackthorn Keep smelled of roasted venison, pine smoke, and anticipation sharp enough to cut skin. Torches lined the stone walls, throwing golden light over long tables crowded with every pack in the kingdom. At the head of the hall, raised on a dais of dark oak, sat King Cassian Voss, the Lichen King. He was everything the stories promised. Impossibly tall, shoulders broad beneath a black ceremonial tunic edged in silver, jaw carved like the cliffs beyond the forest. His hair fell in midnight waves to his collar, and his eyes, molten gold ringed in storm gray, watched the room without blinking. He had ruled for 12 solitary years. No queen, no heir, no weakness shown. Tonight was the winter solstice offering, an ancient tradition no one dared break. Each family presented their unmated daughter of age, dressed in white, to prepare the king's plate and perform the old dances. A ritual of gratitude, they called it. A display of loyalty. But everyone knew the truth. It was a silent auction of beauty and bloodlines, hoping the king might finally choose a mate. For 7 years, Lyra Valen had pretended among the white-gowned girls, head bowed, hands folded, pretending innocence she no longer possessed. Her family believed the lie. She had made sure of it. Each year she watched Cassian accept the offered plates with a curt nod, taste nothing, and send the girls away untouched. Each year the ache inside her grew heavier, darker, until it became obsession. She wanted to be the one who made him feel. Not fear, not duty, just raw, helpless want. She wanted to hear the Lichen King moan. This year, when her father announced that Lyra would represent the Valen family, her heart nearly stopped. Fate, cruel and kind, had finally looked her way. Now she stood in the royal kitchens, sleeves rolled hig stirring a sauce of wild berries and red wine. The heat from the hearth flushed her cheeks, but it was nothing compared to the fire low in her belly. Every motion felt deliberate. The slide of the wooden spoon, the flex of her wrist, the sway of her hips beneath the thin white gown. She imagined his hands replacing hers, imagined his voice rough against her ear. When the plate was ready, venison glazed in the sauce, root vegetables arranged like jewels, she carried it herself into the hall. Silence rippled outward as she climbed the dais steps. Cassian's gaze lifted. For the first time in 7 years, it lingered. She set the plate before him, fingers brushing the edge of the table. Close enough to smell him. Pine, leather, storm. Close enough to see the faint scar that cut through his left eyebrow. "My king," she murmured, bowing just low enough for the neckline of her gown to reveal the soft upper curves of her breasts. His jaw tightened. Barely. But she saw it. The dances came next. Drums thrummed low and urgent. One by one the girls moved before the dais, bodies swaying in patterns passed down through centuries. When Lyra's turn came, she did not look at the floor. She looked at him. Her hips rolled slow, deliberate. Arms lifted above her head, wrists turning like she was offering herself to the moon. The thin fabric clung to damp skin. Every step brought her closer to the edge of the dais, until she could feel the heat radiating from him. His knuckles whitened on the arms of his throne. When the music ended, applause rose like thunder. Lyra slipped away before anyone could stop her, heart hammering so hard she thought it might bruise her ribs. She needed air, needed quiet, needed him. The corridor behind the dais was shadowed and empty. She pressed her back to cool stone, fingers fumbling with the laces at her spine. The gown loosened, slid down her shoulders, bearing her to the waist. Moonlight spilled through a high window, painting her skin silver. Her breasts rose and fell with each shaky breath, nipples tight from cold and anticipation. She closed her eyes, imagining his reaction if he saw her like this. half undressed, waiting. The heavy oak door at the end of the corridor creaked open. She froze. Cassian stepped through, cloak discarded, tunic straining across his chest with every breath. Moonlight caught the sharp lines of his face. His eyes found her instantly, dropped to her exposed breasts, and flared bright gold. A low growl rumbled from his chest, not anger, hunger. He took one step, two, then stopped as if an invisible chain held him back. His hand lifted, slow, careful, like he meant to shield her from his own gaze. Lyra's voice came out soft, trembling but sure. No. A pause, then reckless. I like what I see. The words shattered something inside him. His chest heaved. The war was visible. King against beast, duty against desire. She watched the muscle jump in his jaw, watched his fists clench until claws pricked his palms. In that suspended moment, her body moved without permission. She stepped forward, close enough that the heat of him burned through the thin air between them. Her hand, shaking, bold, brushed the front of his trousers. Just a graze, but the thick, rigid length beneath the fabric jerked hard against her palm. A guttural sound tore from his throat, half growl, half groan. His hand shot out, iron fingers closing around her wrist, not to remove her, to hold her there. Gold eyes locked on hers, wild and blazing. Do that again, he ordered, voice raw as splintered wood. In private, or I'll mark you right here. The threat should have terrified her. Instead, it flooded her with liquid heat. She curled her fingers deliberately, stroking once along his straining length. His hips bucked involuntarily. The growl deepened into something almost pained. That was all it took. The chain snapped. He surged forward, backing her against the cold stone wall. One massive hand cupped the back of her head, protecting it from the impact. The other shoved her gown lower, bearing her completely to his touch. His mouth crashed onto hers, teeth, tongue, claiming. She tasted blood and wine and pure desperation. He lifted her easily, her legs wrapping around his waist on instinct. Fabric tore. His trousers opened just enough. Then he was there, hot, impossibly hard, pressing against her entrance. He paused only long enough to meet her eyes, a silent question. She answered by rolling her hips, taking the first inch herself. A broken sound escaped him. Then he drove forward, deep, merciless, filling her in one brutal thrust. The world narrowed to sensation. The stretch, the burn, the perfect ache. His mouth at her throat, teeth grazing the spot where a mate mark would go. Each thrust pinned her higher against the wall, relentless, punishing, perfect. She clawed at his shoulders, urging him harder, faster. He gave her everything, hips snapping, breath ragged against her skin. The stoic king unraveled before her eyes, golden gaze unfocused, jaw slack with pleasure. When she clenched around him deliberately, he buried his face in her neck and moaned, deep, long, utterly surrendered. The sound undid her. Pleasure crashed through her in waves, pulling him over the edge with her. He pulsed inside her, hot and endless, arms tightening until she could barely breathe. Afterward, he didn't let her go. He stayed buried deep, forehead pressed to hers, breath shaking. For the first time in 12 years, the lichened king looked vulnerable. Lyra smiled against his damp skin, heart aching with something too big for words. She had done it. She had made him moan. And in the quiet aftermath, with his arms locked around her like she was the only thing keeping him anchored, she realized the danger wasn't over. It had only just begun. Chapter 2, The Mark That Wasn't. Cassian's breath still came in ragged waves against Lyra's throat. He hadn't moved, hadn't withdrawn, as though leaving her body might break whatever fragile spell had fallen over them. Moonlight striped the corridor floor, silver on ancient stone, and the only sounds were their slowing heartbeats and the distant echo of music from the great hall. She felt him tremble, actually tremble, the most powerful lichen alive, shaking in her arms. It hurt her heart in a way she hadn't expected. All those years of wanting to crack his control, and now that she had, the sight of him undone made her want to cradle him more than conquer him. His forehead pressed harder to hers. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper, scraped raw. I should have stopped. The words sliced her. Lyra pulled back just enough to see his face. Guilt had already crept into those golden eyes, dimming the wild light that had burned there moments ago. No, she said softly. You didn't force anything. I wanted this. I've wanted this for years. A muscle jumped in his jaw. He eased out of her slowly, carefully as though she were made of glass. The loss of him made her ache all over again. He steadied her when her legs threatened to give, then bent to gather the ruined gown, holding it to her chest like a shield. Not here, he muttered, not like this. Before she could protest, he swept her into his arms, effortless as if she weighed nothing, and carried her through shadowed passages she'd never seen. Up narrow stairs, past silent guards who dropped their eyes the moment they scented their king. Into the royal wing where torches burned low and the air smelled only of him. His chambers were vast, masculine, lonely. A fire crackled in an enormous hearth. Furs covered the bed. Weapons lined one wall. Books, hundreds of them, lined another. He set her down on the edge of the bed as though she might shatter, then stepped back, hands flexing at his sides. Lyra let the gown fall away entirely. She was done hiding. Cassian's gaze raked over her, hungry, reverent, tormented. His wolf was still close to the surface. She could see gold flickering in his irises, hear the low rumble that hadn't quite left his chest. I won't mark you, he said, voice rough. Not tonight, not until… Until what? She rose to her knees on the bed, naked and unashamed. Until you decide I'm worthy? Until the council approves? Until you're sure it's not just the heat making you reckless. He flinched as if she'd struck him. Until I'm sure I won't hurt you. He corrected quietly. A king's mark is permanent. It binds you to every danger that follows me. To every enemy who would use you to break me. His hands curled into fists. I have spent 12 years making certain no one could reach me through a mate, and in one night you have undone all of it. The confession hung between them heavy and aching. Lyra's throat tightened. She crawled forward across the furs until she knelt at the edge of the bed, eye level with his chest. Slowly she reached for his hands, uncurling his fingers one by one. I'm already undone, Cassian, she whispered. I have been since the first time I saw you look at the offerings like they were ghosts. You looked so alone up there. I wanted to be the one who reached you. His breath shuddered out. He sank to his knees in front of her, bringing their faces close. You don't know what you're asking. Then show me, she said. Show me everything tonight, but don't push me away. Something cracked open in his expression. Relief and surrender and fear all at once. He rose, lifting her with him, and laid her back against the furs. This time there was no wall, no frantic rush. Only deliberate, devastating tenderness. He kissed her like he was memorizing her, slow, deep, worshipping. Down her throat, across her collarbones, lingering at the curve where neck met shoulder, the place meant for his bite. He lingered there longest, lips brushing skin, breath hot, teeth grazing but never breaking. When he moved lower, parting her thighs with gentle hands, she arched off the bed. His mouth found her center with devastating precision, tongue stroking, teasing, learning every gasp and shiver. He didn't rush. He took his time, drawing pleasure out of her in long, rolling waves until she was sobbing his name, fingers tangled in his dark hair. Only when she was trembling on the edge did he rise, shedding the rest of his clothes. Moonlight painted every hard line of him. Broad chest scarred from old battles, stomach ridged with muscle, the thick length of him heavy and ready. He covered her body with his, skin to skin, and entered her in one slow, gliding thrust. This was different from the corridor. Deeper, sweeter, more devastating. He moved like he was trying to imprint himself on her soul. Every stroke deliberate, every kiss a promise he couldn't yet speak. Lyra wrapped her legs around his hips, arms around his shoulders, holding him as close as she could. Tears slipped from the corners of her eyes. Not from pain, but from the overwhelming ache of finally being wanted by the one person she'd never dared hope for. When release came, it took them together. She felt him swell inside her, felt the moment his control splintered. He buried his face against her throat again, body shaking, and let out a long, broken moan, low and raw and beautiful. But still he did not bite. Afterward, he held her like she was the only real thing in his world. Traced idle patterns on her back, pressed kisses to her temple, her eyelids, the corner of her mouth. "I will keep you safe," he murmured against her skin, "even if it means keeping you unmarked for now." Lyra wanted to argue, wanted to beg him to claim her fully, but the exhaustion of the night and the warmth of his arms pulled her under. She fell asleep listening to his heartbeat, steady and strong beneath her cheek. She did not hear the knock at the outer door hours later, just before dawn. Cassian did. He rose silently, dressed in black, and stepped into the antechamber. His steward waited, face grim. "The council has convened early, my king. Word has spread through the hall that you have spent the night with one of the offering girls. The Valen family has formally requested she be brought before the elders for examination, to confirm her purity remains intact." Cassian's eyes bled pure gold. "Tell the council," he said, voice lethally quiet, "that if anyone lays a hand on Lyra Valen, they will answer to me." The steward bowed, pale. "They also ask, sire, if you intend to name her as your chosen." Cassian's jaw clenched. He glanced back toward the bedchamber doors where Lyra still slept, trusting and unaware. "Not yet," he said finally, "but soon." He closed the door and stood in the gray pre-dawn light, claws pricking his palms. The secret was already slipping through his fingers. And when morning came, Lyra would have to face her family and the lie that had just become impossible to maintain. Chapter 3. Lies We Tell the Moon. The first light of dawn crept through the high windows of the royal wing, pale and merciless. Lyra stirred beneath the heavy furs, reaching instinctively for the warmth that had cradled her all night. Her hand met only cool sheets. Cassian was gone. For a heartbeat, panic flared hot in her chest. Had it all been a dream? Had the king taken what he wanted and vanished before the sun could witness it? But no. His scent lingered everywhere. On the pillows, on her skin, in the very air she breathed. And on the table beside the bed lay a single black rose, its petals still dewed. Thornless stem tied with a thin silver ribbon. A note rested beneath it, written in a bold, slanted hand. "Stay here until I send for you. Trust no one else." She traced the initial with her fingertip, heart aching with something between tenderness and fear. He was protecting her. But from what? A soft knock sounded at the outer door. 3 measured taps. Lyra pulled the furs around herself and called out, "Who is it?" "Only Mira, my lady," came a gentle voice. "The king's personal attendant. He bade me bring you clothes and breakfast." Lyra opened the door a crack. A small silver-haired woman stood there with a tray in one hand and a bundle of fabric in the other. Her eyes were kind, but they flicked over Lyra's disheveled hair and kiss-bruised lips with quiet understanding. "Come in," Lyra said, stepping aside. Mira set the tray down. Warm bread, honey, stewed fruit, strong tea, then laid out the clothes. A deep green dress of soft wool, cut modestly but beautifully, with silver embroidery at the throat and cuffs. "The king chose the color himself," Mira murmured, a faint smile touching her lips. "Said it would suit your eyes." Lyra's cheeks warmed. She dressed quickly while Mira turned away, giving privacy. When she was decent, the older woman helped lace the back, fingers gentle. "There are whispers in the keep already," Mira said quietly. "The council convened at dawn. Your family has requested an audience and an examination." The word landed like a stone in Lyra's stomach. Examination. They meant to parade her before the elders, to prove whether the offering ritual's purity clause had been upheld. 7 years of careful lies, of excuses and evasion, and now one night with Cassian threatened to unravel everything. She lifted her chin. "Let them request." Mira's eyes softened with something like pity. "The king will not allow harm to come to you. But the law is old, and the elders older. Be careful what truths you speak today, child." When Mira left, Lyra stood at the window overlooking the snow-dusted courtyard. She watched guards drill below, watched banners snap in the cold wind, and felt the weight of what had changed forever. She was no longer just the girl who had watched a lonely king from the shadows. She was the one who had made him tremble. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, turning the snow to glittering diamond. None came. Cassian's expression did not change, but something in his eyes softened. Recognition, perhaps, or relief. "I know," he said quietly. The words stole her breath. "You knew? I've watched you every solstice for 7 years, Lyra." His voice was steady, but there was pain in it. "I noticed the way you held yourself apart from the others. The way your scent never carried the sharp edge of true innocence after that first night. I noticed everything about you." Her heart cracked open, part sorrow, part wonder. "And you still wanted me?" A humorless breath escaped him. "Wanted you?" He stepped closer, close enough that she had to tip her head back to hold his gaze. "I fought it every single year. Told myself it was duty keeping me distant. Told myself a king could not afford distraction. But it was you. Always you." Tears pricked her eyes. She reached up, fingers brushing the scar through his brow. "Why didn't you ever speak? Ever choose?" "Because I was afraid." The admission seemed to cost him. "My parents' mating was political. My mother was used against my father until he broke. When he died protecting her, she followed him within a week. I swore no one would ever have that power over me again." His hand rose to cover hers, pressing her palm to his cheek. "Until the night you looked at me while you danced and I realized I was already lost." Lyra's tears spilled over, not from shame but from the sheer aching beauty of hearing the solitary king lay his heart bare. Cassian brushed the tears away with his thumbs, touch impossibly gentle. "Your past means nothing to me except that it brought you here. Whole, strong, brave enough to want a broken thing like me." "You're not broken," she whispered fiercely. He gave a soft, sad smile. "I have been for a long time." They moved together without thinking. He pulled her into his arms and she went willingly, burying her face against his chest. He held her as though she were the only anchor in a storm-tossed sea. She felt his heartbeat, steady and strong, and let her own match its rhythm. Minutes passed, or hours. Time lost meaning. Eventually he led her to the wide hearth. A fire roared there, fresh logs crackling. He sat on the thick fur rug and drew her down beside him, her back to his chest, his arms wrapped around her. Then she walked out, spine straight, chin high, heart breaking and soaring at once. Behind her she heard the scrape of Cassian's throne as he sat once more. Heard the elders begin to argue in low, urgent tones. But stronger than any voice was the memory burning inside her. The way he had looked at her across the hall, golden eyes fierce with possession and something achingly tender. He had not marked her, but he had chosen her all the same. Later that afternoon, a servant found a single drop of dried blood on the stone floor of the corridor behind the dais, the only physical evidence of what had happened in the moonlight. The servant carried the news straight to Elder Rowan. By nightfall, the whispers had teeth, and in the quiet of the royal wing, Lyra stood at the window again, watching snow begin to fall, wondering how long Cassian could protect her from a truth that was already bleeding through the cracks. Chapter 4. The Price of Secrets. Snow fell thicker now, blanketing the keep in silence. Lyra stood at the window of the royal chambers long after the guards had locked the doors. For her protection, they said. The black rose Cassian had left her still rested on the table, its petals beginning to curl at the edges. She had not seen him since the hall. Hours bled into evening. Servants brought supper on a tray but did not linger. The fire burned low. Lyra paced, then sat, then paced again, every footstep echoing the questions hammering inside her skull. How long could he shield her? How long before the elders forced his hand? How long before her own lies poisoned whatever fragile thing had begun between them? When the door finally opened, well past midnight, she spun toward it with her heart in her throat. Cassian stepped inside alone, snowflakes melting in his dark hair. He carried the cold with him, sharp, clean, edged with pine. The door closed softly behind him, and for a long moment he simply looked at her across the firelit room. No crown, no ceremonial tunic. Just a simple black shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbow, revealing corded forearms marked with old scars. He looked less like a king and more like a man carrying a weight too heavy for one lifetime. Lyra's voice came out smaller than she intended. They found the blood, didn't they? His eyes, storm gold even in the warm light, confirmed it before he spoke. He crossed the room in 3 strides and stopped just short of touching her. Yes. One word, but it carried the weight of an avalanche. She wrapped her arms around herself. My father will demand justice. The elders will say the ritual was defiled. They'll say I deceived everyone. Cassian's jaw tightened. They can say what they like. No one will touch you. You can't stop them forever. She met his gaze, steady despite the ache blooming in her chest. Not without claiming me publicly. And you said yourself you're not ready to. I said I won't risk you, he cut in, voice low and rough. There's a difference. Silence stretched, taut as a drawn bowstring. Lyra drew a shaky breath. The truth she had carried for 7 years pressed against her ribs, demanding release. If they were to drown in this together, she would not let him drown ignorant. "I need to tell you something," she said. He waited, still as stone. "I've never been pure, not in the way the ritual demands." The confession tumbled out, quiet but unflinching. "The first year I was presented, I was 15. Too young, really, but my family insisted. I was terrified. I ran from the hall that night and hid in the stables. A groom, a boy I barely knew, comforted me. It was clumsy, quick, over before I understood what it meant. After that, I learned how to hide the truth, how to bleed on the sheets when needed, how to pretend." She watched his face, waiting for disgust, for withdrawal. None came. Cassian's expression did not change, but something in his eyes softened. Recognition, perhaps, or relief. "I know," he said quietly. The words stole her breath. "You knew? I've watched you every solstice for 7 years, Lyra." His voice was steady, but there was pain in it. "I noticed the way you held yourself apart from the others. The way your scent never carried the sharp edge of true innocence after that first night. I noticed everything about you." Her heart cracked open, part sorrow, part wonder. "And you still wanted me?" A humorless breath escaped him. "Wanted you?" He stepped closer, close enough that she had to tip her head back to hold his gaze. "I fought it every single year. Told myself it was duty keeping me distant. Told myself a king could not afford distraction. But it was you. Always you." Tears pricked her eyes. She reached up, fingers brushing the scar through his brow. "Why didn't you ever speak? Ever choose?" "Because I was afraid." The admission seemed to cost him. "My parents' mating was political. My mother was used against my father until he broke. When he died protecting her, she followed him within a week. I swore no one would ever have that power over me again." His hand rose to cover hers, pressing her palm to his cheek. "Until the night you looked at me while you danced, and I realized I was already lost." Lyra's tears spilled over. Not from shame, but from the sheer aching beauty of hearing the solitary king lay his heart bare. Cassian brushed the tears away with his thumbs, touch impossibly gentle. "Your past means nothing to me except that it brought you here. Whole, strong, brave enough to want a broken thing like me." "You're not broken," she whispered fiercely. He gave a soft, sad smile. "I have been for a long time." They moved together without thinking. He pulled her into his arms and she went willingly, burying her face against his chest. He held her as though she were the only anchor in a storm-tossed sea. She felt his heartbeat, steady and strong, and let her own match its rhythm. Minutes passed, or hours, time lost meaning. Eventually he led her to the wide hearth. A fire roared there, fresh logs crackling. He sat on the thick fur rug and drew her down beside him, her back to his chest, his arms wrapped around her. They watched the flames in silence, sharing warmth, sharing breath. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above the fire's whisper. "I will find a way to keep you safe without chaining you to this crown. I swear it." Lyra turned in his arms to face him. Firelight painted gold across his sharp features, softened the hard lines. She cupped his face in both hands. "I don't want safety without you," she said. "Whatever comes, we face it together." Something fierce and tender flared in his eyes. He leaned in, forehead resting against hers. "Together," he echoed. They stayed there until the fire burned low, trading quiet truths in the glow. Childhood memories, hidden fears, small hopes they had never dared voice. When exhaustion finally pulled at her eyelids, he carried her to bed and tucked her beneath the furs. She expected him to leave, to return to whatever royal duties waited beyond the door. Instead, he slid in behind her, arm heavy across her waist, body curved protectively around hers. Just before sleep claimed her, she heard him murmur against her hair, so softly she almost missed it. "I love you, Lyra Valen. I think I have since the first time you dared to meet my eyes." Her heart swelled until it hurt. Happy, painful, perfect. She twined her fingers with his and held tight. Outside, the snow kept falling, covering the keep in a hush that felt almost sacred. But far below, in the border wilds, riders pushed their horses through the storm. Rogue wolves, outcasts with nothing left to lose, had scented weakness in the kingdom's sudden distraction. By morning, the first alarm horns would sound, and Cassian would have to leave the woman he had finally admitted to loving unprotected, in a keep full of enemies wearing friendly faces. Chapter 5. Blood and Snow. The first horn blast shattered the quiet just before dawn. Lyra jolted awake, Cassian's arm still heavy across her waist. In the gray half-light, she saw his eyes snap open, gold bleeding through the storm gray, every muscle in his body coiled and ready before the second horn even sounded. "Border breach," he said, voice low and lethal. He was already moving, pulling on boots and strapping a sword belt across his chest with practiced speed. Rogues, more than a scouting party this time. Fear, sharp, icy, clawed up her throat. She sat up, clutching the furs to her chest. How many? Enough. He paused at the bedside, leaning down to press a hard, brief kiss to her forehead. "Stay inside the royal wing. The guards have orders. No one enters or leaves without my mark." She caught his wrist before he could pull away. "Come back to me." His jaw flexed. For a heartbeat, the king vanished and the man stood bare before her, eyes fierce with things he hadn't yet said again in daylight. "I will," he promised. Then he was gone, the door closing with a finality that echoed like a gunshot in her chest. The hours that followed were agony. Lyra paced the chambers until the fur rug wore thin beneath her feet. She stood at the window and watched the courtyard fill with armored wolves, black banners snapping in the wind, horses snorting plumes of frost. Cassian rode at the front, cloak billowing like dark wings, face carved from stone once more. He did not look up toward her window, but she felt the moment his gaze brushed the tower anyway, like a phantom touch across her skin. Then they were gone, thundering out through the gates into the white wilderness beyond. The keep felt hollow without him. Servants spoke in whispers. Elders gathered in closed rooms. Her family sent 3 messages requesting audience. All were refused by the royal guard. By midday, the snow had turned to a blinding storm. By dusk, the wind howled like mourning wolves. Lyra could not eat, could not sit. Every creak of the keep sounded like footsteps bringing news she did not want to hear. Night fell hard and cold. She wrapped herself in one of Cassian's cloaks, still carrying his scent, and stood on the narrow balcony outside his chambers, staring into the blackness where the border lay. The storm swallowed everything beyond the walls. She did not cry, she bargained instead, with the moon, with fate, with whatever cruel force had finally given her the man she loved only to threaten to take him away hours later. Let him come back whole. Let him come back at all. I will give anything. The horn sounded again near midnight, different this time, triumphant, returning. Lyra ran. She flew down spiral stairs, past startled guards, into the courtyard where torches sputtered against swirling snow. Riders poured through the gates, armor splashed with blood, faces grim with exhaustion. Wounded were carried on shields. The air reeked of iron and pine and death. She searched every shadowed face, heart hammering so violently she tasted copper. Then she saw him. Cassian rode at the rear, cloak torn and soaked crimson at the shoulder. Snow crusted his hair and lashes. His left arm hung stiffly, pressed to his side. But he was upright. Alive. Eyes scanning the crowd until they found her. The moment their gazes locked, something inside her chest cracked open. Relief so sharp it felt like grief. He dismounted with a hiss of pain, waving off helpers. Every step toward her was deliberate, as though the ground might give way beneath him. When he reached her, snow swirling between them, he stopped just short of touching. "I'm here," he said roughly. "I came back." Lyra's hands shook as she reached for him. She touched his face first. Cold skin, rough stubble, a cut above his brow already healing. Then lower, to the wound at his shoulder, dark blood seeping through the torn fabric. "You're hurt." "Not badly." His good arm came around her waist, pulling her against him despite the pain it must have cost. He buried his face in her snow-damp hair and inhaled like a man breaking the surface after too long underwater. "Needed to feel you. Needed to know you were real." She clung to him, uncaring of the blood staining his cloak onto hers, uncaring of the watching eyes. The storm raged around them, but in the circle of his arm, the world narrowed to heartbeat and breath. "I was so afraid," she whispered against his chest. "I thought—" "I know." His voice cracked just once. "I thought of you every second out there, Your face was the only thing that kept me standing when the line broke. He pulled back enough to look at her. Snowflakes caught on his lashes. In the torchlight, his eyes burned gold, fierce and tender and undone. I love you, he said clearly for anyone close enough to hear. And I'm done waiting for the world to allow it. Her breath caught. Tears froze on her cheeks. Before she could answer, a rider approached. Captain of the guard, face grim beneath his helm. Sire, the prisoner we took, he's poisoned, Silver and Nightshade. He won't last the hour, but he's talking. Says the attack was meant to draw you out. Someone inside the keep paid them. Cassian's arm tightened around Lyra until she felt the tremor run through him. Not fear, but fury. Inside, he repeated, voice deadly soft. The captain nodded. And my king, he claims the order came through a Valen messenger. The name struck like winter lightning. Lyra felt the cold seep into her bones deeper than any storm. Cassian's gaze snapped to hers, searching, protective, already promising vengeance. We'll find the truth, he said, together. But as he led her back toward the keep, his wounded arm cradled against his side, the weight of betrayal settled over them both. Someone in her own bloodline had tried to kill the man she loved. And tomorrow, when the prisoner drew his last breath, the name he carried would change everything.
Chapter 6, Poisoned Crown. The prisoner died just after dawn. Lyra stood in the shadowed corridor outside the infirmary. Cassian's blood-stiffened cloak still wrapped around her shoulders like armor. She had not slept. Neither had he. The rogue wolf, a gaunt, grey-furred outcast, had clung to life long enough to name a traitor. The words had come between ragged coughs, black foam flecking his lips as Silver and Nightshade burned him from the inside out. Valen, seal, gold crescent, payment in advance. Then his eyes rolled back, and the healer pronounced him gone. Cassian's face had been stone throughout the interrogation, but Lyra felt the tremor that ran through him when her family's name was spoken. He had not looked at her yet, not directly, as if meeting her eyes might force him to choose between love and justice too soon. Now the body was carried away, wrapped in coarse cloth, and the captain of the guard waited for orders. Search every Valen chamber, Cassian said, voice flat and cold. Letters, seals, coin purses, anything bearing a gold crescent. Bring Lord Valen and his household to the council room at midday. The captain bowed and left. Silence fell heavy as iron. Only then did Cassian turn to her. The corridor was empty, save for torches guttering in their sconces. Snowlight filtered through narrow windows, turning his skin pale, the wound at his shoulder already bandaged, but still seeping slow crimson through the linen. Lyra? One word, her name, and it carried everything. Apology, fear, fury, love. She stepped toward him, hands reaching. He caught them before they could touch his face, holding them gently but firmly away. I need to hear it from you, he said quietly. Did you know? The question hurt more than any accusation could have. No. Her voice did not waver. I swear on the moon, on my life, on whatever is growing between us, I knew nothing of this. His eyes searched hers, gold flickering restless beneath grey. She saw the war inside him, the king who could not afford weakness, the wolf who would tear the world apart rather than see his mate in pain. I believe you, he said at last. The breath he released seemed to take half his strength with it. But the seal is real. Someone in your house paid for my death. Pain bloomed sharp behind her ribs, not for herself, but for him. The man who had spent 12 years trusting no one, only to be betrayed the moment he let someone close. She pulled her hands free and laid them over his heart instead. Then we find who, together. I will stand beside you when you question my father. I will not hide. A muscle jumped in his jaw. It may break you to hear what he says. It will break me more if you face it alone. Something softened in his expression. Grief and gratitude intertwined. He leaned forward until their foreheads touched, eyes closing. I don't deserve you, he whispered. You have me anyway. They stood like that until footsteps echoed in the distance, guards coming to report.
Midday came too quickly. The council chamber was a cavern of dark wood and older grudges. 7 elders sat in a semicircle. Lord Valen, Lyra's father, stood in the center, flanked by 2 guards. His face was proud, unbowed, but his eyes flicked to Lyra the moment she entered behind Cassian. Disappointment, anger, and beneath it, something colder. Cassian took the high seat but did not sit. He remained standing, one hand braced on the carved arm, the other pressed to his bandaged shoulder. "Present the evidence," he ordered. The captain stepped forward with a small leather pouch. Inside, 3 gold coins stamped with the Valen crescent, and a folded scrap of parchment bearing the same seal. Instructions in cramped handwriting. Draw the king beyond the tree line. Strike at dusk. Payment on proof of death. Lord Valen's expression did not change. "Forgeries," he said smoothly. "Any smith could stamp a crescent. My house has served the crown loyally for generations." One elder, Rowan again, leaned forward. "The handwriting matches your private ledger, my lord." A murmur rippled through the room. Lyra felt the floor tilt beneath her. She had seen that handwriting all her life, on letters, on ledgers, on the margins of books her father annotated. Cassian's gaze remained fixed on her father. "Do you deny sending a messenger to the rogues?" "I deny plotting treason," Lord Valen replied. "But I will not deny wishing the offering ritual had never taken my daughter from her duty." The words landed like a slap. Lyra stepped forward before she could stop herself. "Duty? You paraded me for 7 years like a prize mare and called it duty. When the king finally looked at me as a person, you tried to kill him for it?" Her father's eyes flashed. "He looked at you as a weakness. A king distracted is a king vulnerable. I acted to protect the realm." Cassian's growl filled the chamber, low, lethal, shaking dust from the rafters. "You acted to protect your own influence," he said. "The realm is mine to guard, and Lyra is mine to protect." The declaration rang clear and final, every elder stilled. Lord Valen's composure cracked just a fraction. "You would choose a lying girl over the stability of—" "I choose the woman who sees me," Cassian cut in. "Not the crown, not the fear, me." Silence fell, thick and charged. Lyra's heart pounded so hard she feared it would bruise her ribs. Tears threatened, but she refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of the man who had used her as bait. Cassian turned to the elders. "Lord Valen is stripped of title and lands. He will be confined to the North Tower until formal sentencing. His household will remain under guard." No one dared object. As guards moved to take her father, he looked at Lyra one last time. "I did it for the pack," he said quietly. "One day you'll understand sacrifice." She met his gaze without flinching. "I already do." He was led away. The chamber emptied slowly, elders filing out with bowed heads. When the doors closed, only Lyra and Cassian remained. He swayed slightly, blood loss and exhaustion finally catching up. She was at his side in an instant, sliding beneath his good arm to steady him. "You're burning up," she whispered. The wound, silver-tipped blades had grazed him too. Infection setting in. "I'll heal," he muttered, but his voice was rougher than before. "Not fast enough." Fear sharpened her words. "You need rest, you need—" "You," he finished softly, "just you." He let her guide him back to the royal wing, leaning heavier with every step. In his chambers, she made him sit while she fetched fresh bandages and the healer's strongest herbs. Her hands shook as she cleaned the wound, but she did not stop until it was properly dressed. When she finished, he caught her wrist and pulled her gently onto the bed beside him. They lay fully clothed, his head in her lap, her fingers threading through his dark hair. "I'm sorry," he said against her thigh. "For your father. For the pain of it. I'm sorry you were alone so long. That betrayal feels like proof you were right to be." He turned his face into her palm, pressing a kiss to the center. "I'm not alone anymore." "No," she whispered, "you're not." Outside, the storm raged on, covering the blood in the snow. Inside, they held each other in the firelight, two wounded souls learning how to trust the warmth after so long in the cold. But in the North Tower, Lord Valen was not idle. And the messenger who had carried the gold crescent seal had never been found. Chapter 7, Fractured Loyalties. The North Tower room was cold, even with the fire roaring. Lord Valen sat at a small oak table, wrists unbound. Cassian had granted him that dignity at least. A single guard stood outside the door. Parchment, quill, and ink had been provided at his request. He wrote slowly, methodically, the scratch of the quill the only sound in the stone chamber. Down in the royal wing, Lyra had not left Cassian's side for 3 days. The silver poisoning lingered longer than it should have. Fever came and went in waves. Some nights he burned hot enough that she pressed snow wrapped in linen to his brow. Other nights chills racked him until his teeth chattered, and she curled against his back, trying to lend him every degree of warmth her body could spare. He never complained, only watched her with those storm-gold eyes as though afraid she might vanish if he closed them too long. On the fourth morning, the fever broke. Sunlight slanted through the high windows, turning dust motes to gold. Cassian woke clear-eyed for the first time since the battle. He reached for her hand beneath the furs, fingers threading with hers like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I dreamed you left," he said quietly. "I'm still here." He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "Stay." The word carried a lifetime of loneliness behind it. She leaned down and touched her forehead to his. "Always." A knock interrupted the fragile peace. 3 sharp raps. The captain of the guard entered, face grim. "A letter from the North Tower, sire, delivered by Lord Valen's own hand. He insists it reach you personally." Cassian sat up slowly, waving away Lyra's protest. He broke the wax seal himself. The gold crescent stared up from the parchment like an accusation. Lyra's stomach knotted. Cassian read in silence. His expression did not change, but his grip on the letter tightened until the paper crinkled. "What does it say?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. He handed it to her without a word. "My king, you have taken everything from me, title, lands, freedom. Yet I write not to beg mercy but to offer truth. The plot was mine alone. No other Valen knew, my daughter least of all. She has always been willful but never treacherous. I acted because I believed a king softened by a mate would fall. I was wrong. You returned from the border stronger than you left, and the pack sees it. Punish me as the law demands, but do not let my sin taint her. She is innocent of my ambition. If you truly care for her, set her free of the name Valen. Give her yours instead. I remain in chains or in death your servant. Garrick Valen." The letter slipped from Lyra's fingers. She stared at the words until they blurred. All her life her father had demanded obedience, paraded her for power, used her as leverage, and now, in a cold tower cell, he offered the closest thing to love he had ever shown. Sacrifice. A sob caught in her throat, half grief, half fury. Cassian drew her gently into his arms. She pressed her face to his shoulder, breathing in the clean scent of him, now free of fever sweat. "He's trying to protect me," she whispered, in his twisted way. "I know." Cassian's voice was rough. "And he's right about one thing. I will not let his choices define you." She pulled back, searching his face. "What will you do?" "Exile," he said, "not death. He will live far north beyond the ice fields, no title, no pack, but alive." Relief and sorrow crashed together inside her chest. Alive was mercy. Exile was still loss. That night, Cassian summoned her father to the royal chambers under heavy guard. The 2 men faced each other across the hearth, king and fallen lord, both proud, both scarred by the same events. Lyra stood between them, heart pounding. Lord Valen looked older in the firelight, lines etched deeper around his eyes. When he saw her, something flickered across his face. Regret, perhaps. Cassian spoke first. "Your sentence is exile beyond the frost wall. You leave at first light tomorrow. Alone." Lord Valen inclined his head. "As the king commands." Then unexpectedly he turned to Lyra. "I was wrong," he said simply. "About many things, but not about your strength. You always had more than I gave you credit for." Tears stung her eyes. She wanted to rage at him, to thank him, to ask why it had taken chains for him to see her. In the end, she said nothing at all. He was led away. The door closed. Silence fell. Cassian crossed to her, cupping her face in both hands. "It's over." "No," she said softly, "it's just beginning." He rested his forehead against hers again, the gesture becoming their silent language for everything too big for words. Later, when the keep slept and moonlight silvered the room, Cassian drew her to the wide window overlooking the snow-covered courtyard. "I almost lost you before I ever truly had you," he murmured against her hair. "You didn't. I won't risk it again." He turned her to face him. Firelight and moonlight met in his eyes, turning them molten. "I want to claim you," he said. "Not because tradition demands it. Not because your father suggested it. Because I cannot breathe without knowing you're bound to me as deeply as I am already bound to you." Her heart stuttered. "But only if you want it to," he added quickly, fiercely. "I will wait years if—" She silenced him with a finger to his lips. "I've wanted it since the first night I dared look at you on that throne." Relief flooded his features. He pressed his lips to her palm, then her wrist, then drew her close. "Tomorrow," he promised. "In front of the pack, the elders, the moon, wherever you choose. But tonight, Tonight there was only them. He held her until dawn crept pale across the sky, whispering promises against her skin, tracing patterns on her back with reverent fingers. And in the quiet hours before morning, Lyra finally let herself cry. For the father she was losing, for the family name that would no longer be hers, for the terrifying, exquisite joy of stepping fully into a future with the man who had become her whole world. Far below in the courtyard, guards prepared a single horse for the journey north. But high in the north tower, a second letter, written in different ink, different hand, had already been smuggled out through a bribed servant. The messenger was long gone by the time anyone noticed, and the wax seal on that letter was not a gold crescent. It was a blackthorn. Chapter 8, Cage of Stone. The exile left at dawn. Lyra watched from the royal balcony as the lone rider, her father cloaked in plain gray, hands unbound but pride stripped bare, passed beneath the gates. He did not look up. The portcullis clanged shut behind him like the closing of a chapter she had never been allowed to write. Cassian stood beside her, arm braced protectively around her waist. Neither spoke until the figure vanished into the white horizon. "Now you are free of him," he said quietly. "No," she answered, "I'm free with you." He pressed a kiss to her temple, lingering there as though drawing strength from her warmth. For a moment the world felt almost gentle. Then the storm broke. It began with a servant's scream in the lower halls. By the time Lyra and Cassian reached the council chamber, elders were already gathered, faces pale with outrage. Elder Rowan stood at the center, holding a parchment sealed in black wax, a thorn emblem pressed deep into it. "This was found hidden in Lord Valen's tower cell," he announced, "smuggled out before his departure. It bears instructions to an unknown ally. If the king weds the Valen girl, strike at the heart of the ceremony. End the line before it begins." The word struck Lyra like winter wind. Cassian's grip on her hand tightened until bones ached. Rowan's gaze fixed on her, cold, accusing. "The handwriting is not your father's, but the paper came from Valen ledgers. The ink matches samples from your family's private study, and the messenger was seen wearing Valen colors." Murmurs rose like smoke. Another elder, Lady Sareth, sharp-eyed and unforgiving, spoke next. "We cannot ignore the pattern. First an assassination attempt paid with Valen gold. Now this. The king's safety demands distance from the source." Cassian's growl rolled through the room, low and dangerous. "Speak plainly." Rowan met his eyes without flinching. "We demand the woman be held in custody until the traitor is found, for her own protection, and for yours, sire." The chamber erupted in argument, some elders protesting the harshness, others insisting on caution. But the vote, when it came, was swift. Custody, immediate separate tower, guarded day and night. Cassian's fury filled the room like thunder. Claws pricked his fingertips, gold bled fully into his irises. He stepped forward, placing himself bodily between Lyra and the elders. "You will not take her from me." Rowan's voice was grave. "The law is ancient, sire. Even kings bow when the pack's survival is at stake." For a heartbeat, Lyra thought Cassian would shatter the council table with his bare hands. Then she felt his fingers tremble around hers. He was calculating how many guards he could fight, how much blood he could spill before they overwhelmed him, how long he could protect her alone against an entire kingdom's fear. And he was losing the math. Lyra stepped forward, placing her free hand over his heart. "Let them," she said softly. "If it buys us time to find the real traitor, let them." His head snapped toward her. "I will not leave you in a cage." "You will not leave me at all," she corrected. "You will find who wrote that letter, and I will wait, knowing you are coming for me." Pain twisted his features, raw, unguarded. He cupped her face in both hands, thumbs brushing her cheeks as though memorizing the feel of her skin. "I failed you once by keeping you unmarked," he whispered, voice breaking. "I will not fail you again." Guards approached, 6 of them armored, eyes averted out of respect or fear. Cassian allowed them to take her only because she walked willingly. The East Tower cell was not the dungeon most feared. It was high, clean, with a narrow window overlooking the frozen lake. A bed, a table, books left by some kinder soul. But the door locked from the outside, and the bars on the window were silver-laced. Days bled into nights. Food arrived on trays. Servants spoke little. Elders questioned her daily. Gentle at first, then sharper. Always the same questions. Did she know the handwriting? Had anyone in her family spoken against the king? Had she ever seen the black thorn seal before? She answered truthfully every time. No, no, no. But doubt grew like frost on glass. Cassian was barred from visiting during daylight. Council decree. He sent letters instead, slipped past guards by loyal hands. Short, fierce words that made her chest ache. I feel you even through stone. Hold on, I am coming. At night when the keep slept, he came anyway. The first time, she heard the soft scrape at the door and thought it a dream. Then the lock clicked and he was there, shadowed, cloaked, eyes glowing gold in the darkness. He crossed the cell in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms so tightly she could feel his heartbeat thundering against her own. I'm here, he breathed against her hair. I'm here. They sank to the floor together. Backs against the cold stone wall, her head on his shoulder, his fingers tangled in hers. He told her what he had learned. The blackthorn seal belonged to an old noble house thought extinct. House Draven, enemies of Cassian's father, presumed dead after the purge 12 years ago. Someone had survived. Someone close enough to forge alliances, bribe servants, plant evidence. I will find them, he vowed. And when I do, this cage opens forever. Lyra traced the lines of his face in the moonlight. I'm not afraid of the cage, she said. I'm afraid of a world where you stop fighting for us. He pressed his forehead to hers. Never. Every night after he came, sometimes they spoke. Of plans, of memories, of the life they would build when the storm passed. Sometimes they simply held each other in silence, drawing breath from the same small space of air. On the 7th night he brought a single white flower, moonbloom rare and fragile, picked from the royal greenhouse. For the day you walk free, he said. She tucked it behind her ear and he smiled, the real one, small and heartbreaking, that reached his eyes only for her. But on the 8th morning, everything changed. The healer arrived with breakfast instead of the usual guard. Her face was pale, hands trembling as she set down the tray. My lady, she whispered, glancing at the door. You must know. There is talk. Whispers among the women. Your courses are late. The signs. Lyra's hand flew to her stomach. The room tilted. Pregnant. The word echoed in her mind like a drumbeat. Joy and terror braided together. Cassian's child. Their child. Growing in secret while she sat behind bars, while traitors circled, while the pack debated whether she was salvation or poison. She pressed both palms flat against her abdomen, feeling nothing yet but knowing. The healer left quickly, fear in her eyes. Lyra sank onto the bed, staring at the narrow strip of sky visible through the barred window. A new life, a new vulnerability, and a new reason to fight. That night when Cassian came, she would tell him. She only prayed the walls were thick enough to hold their joy and their fear until morning. Because once the council learned of the heir, mercy would no longer be an option. Only war, the child she carries, is my heir. Any hand raised against them answers to me. Rowan's voice sharpened. You cannot simply declare, I can. Cassian's tone turned lethal. And I do. He reached for the chains on her wrists. Silver burned his palms. He did not care. With a surge of raw strength, he snapped the links apart. The broken irons clanged to the stone floor. Gasps turned to murmurs. Some elders looked outraged. Others, younger captains, common pack members, watched with something closer to hope. Cassian faced Rowan fully. You want judgment? Then let the moon decide. Tonight is the full moon. I will claim her under its light, in the old circle, with the entire pack as witness. If the bond takes, if the moon accepts, your accusations end. Forever. Rowan's eyes narrowed. And if the bond fails? Cassian's smile was cold. It won't. Lyra felt her heart thunder against her ribs. The old rite was ancient, rarely invoked. A true mating bond, witnessed by the full moon, could not be faked. If the moon rejected them, if no mark held, no light flared, the union would be deemed false by divine law. And the consequences would be severe. But Cassian was offering everything, his crown's legitimacy, his authority, his life, on the belief that what burned between them was real. She placed her hand over his heart. Yes, she said clearly. Tonight. The council had no choice but to agree. The rest of the day passed in a haze. Lyra was returned, not to the tower but to the royal chambers under Cassian's personal guard. Preparations began immediately. White gown woven with silver thread, Moonbloom wreaths, the ancient circle in the courtyard cleared of snow and ringed with torches. Cassian barely left her side. When elders demanded final consultations, he refused entry. When nobles begged audience, he ignored them. Instead, he sat with her by the fire, holding her close, speaking softly of the future he now refused to live without. "I was afraid the mark would cage you," he admitted. "Afraid my enemies would become yours, but losing you to fear is worse than any battle." She traced the line of his jaw. "We fight together now. All of us." Her hand drifted to her stomach, still flat but carrying impossible promise. His eyes softened. Wonder and terror braided together. He covered her hand with his. "Our pup," he whispered, voice breaking on the word. "I will be better than my father was. I swear it." Night fell swift and bright. The full moon rose huge and silver over Blackthorn Keep, bathing the courtyard in ethereal light. The entire pack gathered, hundreds of wolves in human form, eyes reflecting moonlight, breath fogging in the cold. The ancient circle of standing stones waited, snow swept clean from the grass within. Chapter 9. The Moon's Judgment. The secret lasted exactly one night. By morning, the healer's whisper had traveled through servants' corridors, through kitchen gossip, through the sharp ears of Elder Rowan's informants. By midday, the council chamber was packed. Elders, nobles, captains, even trusted pack members allowed to witness what they called the Moon's Judgment. Lyra was brought down from the East Tower in daylight for the first time in days. Chains of silver-laced iron circled her wrists, not tight enough to cut, but heavy enough to remind everyone of her status. Guards flanked her. The walk through the keep felt endless, every stare a brand on her skin. Cassian waited on the dais. He had not slept. Shadows bruised the skin beneath his eyes, and his jaw carried the tension of a man holding back a storm. When he saw the chains, his entire body went rigid. A low growl escaped before he could stop it, silencing the room. Rowan stood at the center table, a scroll unfurled before him. "The woman Lyra Valen," he began formally, "stands accused of complicity and treason against the crown. Evidence links her bloodline to 2 separate attempts on the king's life. New testimony confirms she now carries a child, conceived outside sanctioned mating." Gasps rippled through the hall. Cassian's claws extended fully, digging into the wood of his throne. "Testimony from whom?" "From the royal healer," Rowan replied. "Confirmed by physical examination this morning." Lyra lifted her chin. She had felt the healer's gentle, trembling hands earlier, the quiet murmur of confirmation. She had not cried then. She would not cry now. Rowan continued. "An unsanctioned child in the royal line is a vulnerability the kingdom cannot afford while treason walks our halls. We move for immediate separation of mother and heir until—" "No." Cassian's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. He rose slowly, every inch the Lycan king. "You will not touch her. You will not touch our child." The word R echoed, fierce and possessive. Rowan did not flinch. "The law is clear, sire. A mating unclaimed in the eyes of the pack is not recognized. The child has no protection until—" "Then recognize it now." Silence fell absolute. Cassian descended the dais steps. Guards parted instinctively. He walked straight to Lyra, ignoring the elders, ignoring protocol. When he reached her, he cupped her face in both hands, gentle despite the claws, and looked into her eyes. "I'm sorry," he said, loud enough for the entire hall to hear. "I waited too long. I thought distance would keep you safe. I was wrong." Tears threatened, but she held them back. "You're here now. I'm never leaving again." He turned to face the assembly, one arm sliding protectively around her waist. "I defy this council's ruling," he declared. "Lyra Valen is my true mate." Lyra walked barefoot, gown flowing like liquid starlight. Cassian waited at the center, shirtless despite the freeze, skin marked with old scars and new resolve. When she reached him, he took her hands. No words were needed. The rite was older than language. They knelt together, foreheads touching. The moon crested directly overhead. Cassian tilted her head gently, exposing the curve where neck met shoulder. His eyes asked one final time. She answered by arching toward him. His teeth sank deep, precise, claiming eternal. Light exploded behind her eyes, white hot, searing through every vein. The bond flared to life like lightning striking dry tinder. She felt him, His heart, his wolf, his love, flood into her soul the same moment hers poured into him. A ring of silver fire rippled outward from the mark, visible to every witness. Gasps rose from the crowd. Some fell to their knees. The moon had accepted. When he pulled back, the mark glowed faintly. 2 crescent bites intertwined, already healing into a permanent scar. Cassian's eyes shone gold with tears he refused to let fall. "Mine," he whispered against her skin. "Yours," she answered, voice steady despite the tears streaming down her cheeks. "Always." The pack erupted in howls, joy, relief, allegiance. But across the kingdom, in hidden places, riders spurred their horses into the night. Word would spread by dawn. The Lycan king had taken a mate. An heir was coming. And neighboring kingdoms, who had long watched for weakness, saw only opportunity. Declarations of war began to draft before the moon even set. In the circle, wrapped in Cassian's arms, Lyra felt the first distant rumble of what was coming. But for tonight the moon had judged. And they had won. Chapter 10, Crown of Fire. The moon still hung low and full when the last howls faded into the night. The pack dispersed slowly, reverently, leaving the ancient circle lit only by dying torches and silver light. Cassian and Lyra stood alone at its heart, wrapped in each other's arms, the fresh mating mark throbbing warm and alive on her skin. For the first time in years, Cassian breathed freely. The weight of solitude had lifted. He had a mate, an heir on the way, a future no longer defined by empty thrones and silent halls. He brushed his thumb across the glowing crescents on her neck, wonder softening the hard lines of his face. "You're mine now," he whispered, voice rough with emotion. "In every way the moon and the pack will recognize." Lyra smiled up at him, tears glittering on her lashes. "And you're mine, Cassian Voss, king or not." He bent to kiss her, slow, deep, sealing the vow all over again when the first horn sounded from the watchtower. Not the triumphant call of return, the warning of attack. They broke apart, heads snapping toward the battlements. Distant shouts rose over the wind. Then flames, bright orange against the snow, bloomed along the eastern ridge. Cassian's body went rigid. "Draven," he growled. "They're using the ceremony as cover." Lyra's heart slammed against her ribs. House Draven, the Black Thorn seal. The survivors who had waited 12 years for vengeance. They had chosen this night, when the entire pack was gathered in one place, defenses thinned, attention turned inward. Cassian cupped her face urgently. "Go to the keep, the royal wing, bar the doors." "No." She gripped his wrists. "I'm not hiding while you fight. You're carrying our child. And I'm your mate." She met his eyes fiercely. "We stand together, you said it yourself." For a heartbeat, agony twisted his features, the instinct to protect warring with the knowledge she was right. He nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Together then, but stay close." They ran. The courtyard erupted into controlled chaos. Captains barked orders. Wolves shifted mid-stride, fur bursting through skin. Archers raced to the walls. Cassian's voice cut through it all, calm, commanding, rallying the pack with a strength that sent shivers down Lyra's spine. She stayed at his side as he armed himself. Sword belt buckled, cloak discarded, claws extended. When he turned to her again, the king was fully present, ferocious, unbreakable. "Eastern gate first," he said. "They'll try to breach there." They climbed the stairs to the battlements, snow whipped sideways in the wind. Below in the valley, torches moved like rivers of fire, hundreds, maybe thousands. Draven banners snapped black and red, siege ladders already rising against the outer wall. Cassian's hand found hers, squeezing once. "Whatever happens, don't," she cut in softly. "We're going home together tonight." He gave her the ghost of a smile, small, heartbreaking, full of love. The first wave hit the walls like thunder. Arrows darkened the sky. Stone shattered under catapult fire. Wolves leaped from the battlements to meet climbers below. The night filled with snarls, screams, the wet clash of steel. Cassian fought at the forefront, a force of nature, sword flashing silver, claws rending armor, body moving with lethal grace. Lyra stayed back only far enough to be safe, bow in hand, one of the few weapons she had trained with in secret years ago. Every arrow she loosed found a mark. Hours bled together. The moon tracked slowly westward. The pack held, barely. Dawn crept pale and bloody over the horizon when the tide finally turned. Draven forces, overextended, exhausted, began to falter. Cassian's roar carried across the battlefield, calling the final push. Wolves surged forward in a black wave, driving the invaders back into the snow-choked valley. By full light, the eastern ridge was silent save for the moans of the dying and the crackle of dying fires. Victory. But not without cost. Cassian found Lyra on the wall walk, blood-streaked but standing. He pulled her into his arms without a word, burying his face in her hair. She felt his body shake, not from cold, but from the aftermath of battle and the terror of nearly losing everything in one night. They stood like that as the sun rose higher, painting the snow gold and red. In the days that followed, the keep healed. Wounded were tended, dead were honored, Draven survivors were routed or captured. The Blackthorn banner burned in the great hall, ashes scattered to the wind. Cassian refused to leave Lyra's side for long. When council demanded reports, he brought her with him. When scouts rode out, he kept her hand in his. The pack watched their king, once distant, untouchable, now openly protective, openly tender, and something shifted. Loyalty deepened into love. Weeks turned to months. Snow melted into spring. Lyra's belly rounded softly beneath flowing gowns. Cassian spoke to their unborn child every night, palm pressed to her skin, voice low and awed. One warm evening, as wildflowers pushed through the courtyard stones, Cassian led her back to the ancient circle, now repaired, torches unlit, moon just rising. He knelt before her, taking both her hands. "I promised you a life," he said quietly. "Not just survival, a life." Tears filled her eyes. He rose and kissed her, slow, reverent, tasting of forever. Behind them, the pack gathered silently at a distance, not summoned but drawn by instinct. They watched their king and queen stand together under the rising moon, hands linked over the curve of new life. No horns sounded this time, only peace. But in the quiet of that same night, far from the circle, Lyra's breath caught sharp and sudden. A ripple of pain tightened across her belly. Too early, too strong. She gripped Cassian's hand, eyes wide. "It's time," she whispered. His face went pale beneath the moon. The final battle was over. The hardest one was just beginning. And as the pack howled in sudden joyous alarm, calling healers, clearing paths, lighting torches to guide the way, Cassian carried his mate toward the keep, heart pounding with terror and wonder. Their pup was coming, early, under the same full moon that had bound them. And whatever the night brought, pain, joy, fear, love, they would face it the only way they knew how. Together. If you're still feeling that ache in your chest from Cassian and Lyra's journey, the raw passion, the heart-shattering sacrifices, the way they fought through betrayal, war, and fear just to hold each other under the moon, then you know this story isn't over. Their pup is coming early. The kingdom is finally at peace, but peace never lasts long in a world of wolves. I'm already writing Season 2, The Birth, the new threats rising from the ashes of House Draven, the moment Cassian holds his child for the first time, and the impossible choice he'll have to make when an even greater danger forces him to decide, protect his family, or protect his crown. If you want to be the first to read it the moment it drops, if you can't stop thinking about that mating mark and need more of their fire, if you're dying to know whether their love can survive what's coming next, drop a below, reply with more or Season 2 and save this post. I'll tag you the second the next episode is ready. Don't miss it. Their story is only getting started and it's about to get even wilder. Who's ready for more Cassian growling, more Lyra fighting, and more heart-melting, soul-claiming, can't-look-away romance? Let me hear you.